I'm Eric Holdeman, and this is Disaster Zone, a show about emergencies and disasters that can happen anywhere and at any time. Many university campuses are like small cities with thousands of students and staff. And what does it take to keep a campus safe and prepared for a disaster? Well, today we're going to find out because we're talking to the University of Washington's Emergency Management Director, Steve Shravat. So Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Eric. Glad to be here.
And I forgot to mention, I still have my University of Washington sweatshirt that I got 10 years ago.
Great.
From being at one of your programs. So still wear it proudly in the evenings to stay warm.
Glad we could help.
Hey, so Steve, and none of us started out saying, okay, I want to have a career in emergency management based on our age. Maybe today that does happen. How did you end up becoming involved in emergency management?
Well,
in the disaster business sometimes.
Actually, my first career goal as a small child was to be a Keebler elf, and obviously that didn't turn out as well as I expected it to be. So I took the next best thing. As you mentioned, this career path is relatively new in today's fields. There were no emergency managers when you and I were getting out of high school and college. So, when I grew up, I wanted to be a city manager.
Okay.
So I worked for the city of Phoenix after graduate school in their graduate intern program. And, Phoenix is not known to have a lot of disasters, but we had some floods. And there was no emergency management function for the sixth largest city at the time. And I was stuck in the budget office and paid the bills, but it wasn't exactly exciting. And they offered me some opportunity to work with these FEMA people coming into town to deal with the financial paperwork that had to deal with the floods. And so I jumped at the chance, caught the bug, and I thought, this is a really cool career. And I sort of turned it into a career and a job eventually. And from that point, moved to other positions. I was the deputy director for Washington, D.C.'s office during anthrax, during 9/11, during that very stressful period.
That's a really very high-profile time. The whole launching of the Department of Homeland Security and those threats.
Well, I had a full head of hair. It was all dark then, and so I decided when this position opened up in Seattle at the UW, I thought this was a perfect opportunity to go from one Washington to a different Washington, and I think I made the right choice, and I've been here for the last 13 years, establishing this Office of Emergency Management for the UW system.
Okay, you might be the senior emergency manager left standing in a single organization. Barb Graff's at Seattle, but she was at Bellevue before that. You could be the senior guy, the dean of emergency managers in Washington State. So when were you in Phoenix? Was that about 1996?
It was 88 through right before Y2K, so 2000.
Okay, it's interesting when we were looking to design the King County Emergency Center, the Regional Coordination Center, we visited your EOC. I don't think you were there, and it was,
I may have been, but it was amazing. It probably had big screen televisions, and we thought it was state of the art back then.
Well, you had vests, I remember, behind all the chairs. So our paths crossed way back then. So, what's an emergency management program entail for a university? And how's that different from, you've been at a city, and, both a couple cities here in different perspectives. So how's that differ from a city emergency management program? Well, there's a lot of similarities.
I was going to say it's very much like a city. Well, the difference is that generally, no matter where you go in the country, a college university tends to be more complex and more diverse than the community in which it sits. I mean, I look at our sister organization in Wazoo. The university is very different from the county and the city in which it resides. The University of Washington, as the nation's largest publicly funded research institution, has got a number of additional hazards and challenges because of the nature of what we do as truly a multinational corporation with, running 4 hospital systems, 72,000 daily population on our campus. We've got a number of, similar to cities, we've got non-English speakers, we've got everything from small children all the way up to senior citizens. The vast majority are young 20-somethings, but we have the whole variety of our spectrum. But then we have some different things that aren't traditionally in a lot of cities, such as chemicals. We have hundreds of thousands of research animals, everything from fruit flies all the way up to monkeys, that we have to deal with and protect in addition to our citizens as part of our research footprint. So there's some things that are different. They're the same, but we still treat our customers as our citizens, because what impacts the city impacts the university. There's no wall between us.
Okay. And you mentioned for university, the medical piece. A lot of people don't realize that Harborview is...
It is a University of Washington run and operated institution.
Yeah.
Harborview is owned by the county. The county owns the bricks and mortar, but everybody from the first line custodian all the way up to the CEO is on the University of Washington payroll.
It's not just the University of Washington Hospital that's part of
correct.
that system. Another aspect of this is just the number of foreign students that are on campus. We saw, unfortunately, it wasn't your population, but we had the Ride the Ducks accident with a bus, and it was the international students. Boy, that created an entirely different dynamic for that incident because of all the foreign students. How does that impact you?
Well, you know, while the vast majority of our students, well, faculty and staff, the vast majority of our students are of legal age over 21. There's a few that aren't. Parents still consider their children attending our university, be they foreign nationals or U.S. citizens, as minors, and so we have a duty to protect them, no matter what language is their native tongue. The crux here and the difference is that while English is required as an admission standard for the University of Washington, there has to be a base level of speaking English. There's a number of cultural sensitivities that are very different in terms of very simple things. The duck was a perfect example. How do you actually bring back parents and reunite families when perhaps their family is half around the world, and we've got to very quickly deal with those issues? We're unique, and actually the university has one of my counterparts at the UW. His title is Global Emergency Manager. So we have a person who deals 24/7 with not only deals with all the other time zones throughout the world when there's an earthquake in Tibet or a civil disturbance in Haiti, and dealing with those folks and making sure that they're protected, they have the resources, and if necessary, last resort, bring them back to the United States as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and international corporations have to deal with their staff traveling all the time, and that's the same issue you're talking about. When students are not deployed, but attending another university, they're part of the program, you still have your linkages to them.
Well, I think there's this common misconception that we have the easy button, where as we have a communicable disease outbreak such as H1N1 a few years ago, and the leadership of the university said, tell us exactly who's where and when. Well, we're talking about very mobile adults that are doing research, that are on work study abroad programs. It's not like a grade school where you have an attendance sheet and a bus driver who knows where they are. It's a challenge because they are adults, they're very mobile, and trying to ensure that we can keep track of them, and not as Big Brother, but just to ensure that we know where they are, so if something does happen, we can make those connections with their family, with staff, and others who can support them if necessary.
Okay. Yeah. Are you using any particular application to do that?
In terms of a software program, there's requirements to register, but compliance is always 100%. It's getting better. But these are oftentimes in a university setting, mandates and requirements are looked at as perhaps and maybes. We're doing our best to show that there's a benefit for people who are traveling overseas on behalf of the university, either doing study or research, so that we know where they are. But we have an homegrown type of a system, a database that tracks them as best as we can.
Okay. And certainly you have this transitory population that rotates in and out. There's school going on all the time at some point, but I just think about trying to corral and guide students, at that young age in life. Professors are notoriously, I think, independent.
And nicely put.
Don't want to be told, and then you have support. do you have the same approach to each one of these populations, or have you found something works better with one over the other?
Well, there's not a one-size-fits-all. You hit the nail on the head. What we try to do is show that the messaging has got to be very different for these populations. Generally with students, be they undergraduate or graduate students, they're at the point in their life where they're invincible. They're away from mom and dad for the first time. Things like co-pays and insurance is not something they think about. And so trying to promote a message of preparedness is difficult when you're fighting against term papers and parties and so forth. So it's not exactly what we call rainbows and unicorns. However, sometimes it's almost the exact opposite with grade school, where you use the children to get the message to the parents. We try to push the message to the parents, who are ultimately paying the bill and are concerned, so that they can then push it back to their students, so that they can do things such as sign up for our UW Alert system, which is our mass notification system, which is voluntary.
Yeah.
So we work with the parents to get to the students. The staff and faculty, staff is actually pretty easy. They've been very good partners. Faculty, as you mentioned, are very independent. Many of them are tenured. They're out doing their own thing and doing wonderful things, and cures for cancer, and you're looking at diseases and so forth. But once again, this is just a one-off that's hard to keep their attention as something that they need to think about occasionally, so they can protect their research and protect their students.
Yeah. And so, when I say in emergency management, you can't do everything. I mean, you have to set priorities. What have you found are your priorities in this university setting for your emergency management program?
Really, it's trying to get the exposure and trying to continually keep a message that isn't necessarily all, happy things. This is people look at us oftentimes as an insurance salesman coming to your door. You don't like that sales call, but you're glad that when something happens, you paid that premium. And so our challenge and what we try to do really is try to get out in the community, meaning the campus community, and we've got 3 major campuses, and at least let people know when we're there and what resources are available and how they can, everything from the very basic preparedness level as an individual, be prepared so that when the bad thing happens, or whatever it might be, they're at least they can take care of themselves, so that the university, and this is very self-serving, the university isn't out there making sure that we have to take care of 70,000+ people who weren't prepared.
Okay. And before we go to the break, just how many staff do you have there on your staff?
Oh, at my
in
office,
emergency
it's
management.
very small. I've got actually 3 full-time staff.
And that's counting yourself?
That's 4 total, counting myself. We just were lucky enough, and actually for a university our size, that's pretty typical. Emergency management offices, be they at municipal, state, county, or university levels, don't have a lot of extra staffing.
Right.
So we do a lot with sort of a bare bones staffing level. However, we're lucky enough that just last year we were able to hire a person whose sole job it is. Her title is Seismic Resilience Program Manager.
Is it Sarah?
Stacy Smith.
Stacy Smith. I just met her again a few weeks ago. So.
Yeah, so we're really lucky because it's pretty rare. We didn't ask for it, but we're glad we got her position. She's going to focus solely on the threat of earthquakes, which, while we're going to train her in other things, and she's going to help us out in a number of other things, such as working football games and chemical spills. Yeah. Understanding that constant threat of earthquakes is something that we think, and the university leadership said is important enough to have a full-time position who does nothing but earthquake preparedness.
Okay. And did you have to push for that, or nothing happens just? It
nothing
doesn't fall out of the sky.
It was sort of an unexpected gift. You never turn away a position. And when you've only got 3 people and they give you a 4th, I've automatically added 25% to my staff. And so she comes very highly recommended. She graduated from the UW's master's program in infrastructure. And so we're glad. We like to think of that position as our earthquake concierge.
Okay.
So anybody who has a question about earthquakes, Stacy is the go-to gal. And so we're glad to have her on board, and we're really going to use her.
I want to ask one more question before we go to break, and that is, where are you located in the university systems organization chart? On the government side and in business, it can just be all over the place. And if I remember right, you might have had several different locations, but where are you now?
Well, there's no one perfect solution in any organization. You can argue As long as you have the support of the senior leadership, you can be put in the custodian's office for all I care, and you have enough resources. Currently, our office is a division or a department of the Facility Services Department, which is a large 1,000-employee, generally blue-collar trades organization that are the plumbers, the groundskeepers, the painters, the motor pool. While it's not a perfect fit, I can tell you that the support we get and understanding, this would be, I guess, the Public Works Department for the university.
Okay.
They bring to bear a lot of resources
Yep.
and are actually the ones who put the university back together if there's ever a disaster. So
It gives you an operational
it
component.
definitely does, and it gives me a much wider appreciation for the things we often take for granted living in a modern society, of being able to flip the light switch and the lights come on, the electricity works, the water runs. This is the department that ensures that the university runs.
Okay. All right. Well, this has gone really fast, Steve. So we're going to take a quick break. And for you folks at home, watch this message. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about the University of Washington, their emergency management program, and some of the types of issues, unfortunately, we've seen universities deal with, like workplace violence and just plain violence on campuses. So watch this message, and we'll be right back.
So I've come up with the family emergency plan.
Great. What is it?
It's difficult to talk about, so I'm not telling you.
How will we know what to do?
You won't.
I'm so glad I won't have to remember anything.
And me too. Thanks for this, sweetie.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
Welcome back to Disaster Zone, a show about emergencies and disasters. And today's program is about the University of Washington's Emergency Management program. And our guest today is Steve Charvat, the director there. And Steve, why don't we just pick up where we left off on this? But I think one of the unfortunate things is universities, college campuses, high schools, these educational institutions have been in the news just for places where violence are happening. How has your program, the university, reacted to these other events and trying to do what you were talking about earlier, protecting students and staff? And
Sure. Well, we always say, when you say Virginia Tech, what comes into most people's minds? World-renowned agricultural extension research school? No, it's the terrible tragedy that happened in 2007. What a lot of people don't realize is that 2 weeks to the day prior to the Virginia Tech massacre, we had a double murder-suicide on our campus at Gould Hall, just off campus.
And was that a workplace violence?
It was a workplace violence. It was a known perpetrator with his girlfriend and so forth. Terrible tragedy, but it was 2 weeks prior, and I can tell you we learned, from that incident and then compounded by the terrible tragedy in Virginia Tech, that we were hopefully unprepared in some of primarily our outreach in terms of notification. That was a watershed event for not only the University of Washington, but as you mentioned, every higher education institution, because we had already had Columbine. Other ones, obviously, you could just say Sandy Hook, you can say Umpqua Community College. I mean, it just continues on and on. And
it was, Virginia Tech was this mass notification seminal event that universities, I'm sure you all instituted something.
Well, the problem, there's this, unlike, say, a grade school or high school, where you literally can probably have a button and you can press it and it'll lock the 10, 12, 20 doors. In the University of Washington, Seattle campus has over 300 buildings, and that's probably even more if you count some of the off-campus leased buildings. We don't have that magic button where if there is a threat of an active shooters, we can press a button and it'll instantly lock the bad guys out and keep the folks inside safe. So the best thing we can do is have an informed public, and we're using social media and other technological tools to what we do as quickly as we can, notify as many people as we can that there's a threat and what they should do and what the next step should be. And that was what we used when we had our event 2 weeks prior to Virginia Tech.
Okay, and You have your own police department, and does the Seattle Police Department also integrate with them completely, or how does that work on day-to-day basis?
Well, day to day we have mutual aid and automatic aid. You know, you don't notice oftentimes when you're going from the City of Seattle jurisdiction to the University of Washington campus. There's such a blend, especially in the U District. They work very well together. Our police department is more than a security agency. I mean, they're fully
commissioned
accredited.
officers.
They're commissioned officers with guns, a jail. In fact, they're building a brand new headquarters. It's just going to open up in about 2 months. That's going to have the most modern equipment. To have that, we have our own 911 center, and we work very closely with the City of Seattle Police on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. And how far are you guys delving into social media and using that, whether it's situational tool or that?
Well, I joke because about 5 years ago, we had a senior executive who deals with media-type subjects, and we were mentioning about, you know, the fact that it was MySpace, Facebook, you know, that there's these tools coming out that can be quite useful. And this person, he or she, said it's a fad like breakdancing and it'll go away. We have definitely seen this, you know, and it's a tool that, like it or not, it's here, and we can either avoid it and be behind the curve. We fully embraced it. Now, albeit it seems to change from day to day. Every time I go on the news, there's another app that's out there that even I haven't heard, that college kids, as the adults start using it, the children, the young generation moves away.
They went off Facebook to Snapchat, and they're on to something else by now.
You know, that's it. You know, the news cycle and the information cycle is instantaneous now. We can't wait for the noon news, the 5 o'clock news, of the morning newspaper. We've got to understand that this is a tool that's out there, and how to harness the efforts of these tools. And we're always one step behind, but at least we've understood now that this is something that needs to be embedded as part of our fabric of communication and assessing the situation.
Okay. And what about other technology? Here later this spring, I'm going to do a session at a conference on all the technology coming at emergency management. Do you feel like you're being overwhelmed sometimes with it? Or?
You know, technology, like anything else, it's just a tool. And, you know, the tools that our parents use are different than we use, than our children are going to use. And it shouldn't be the thing that leads us into doing what we need to do. A tool without a well-trained person is just that. It's just a tool. So we always like to say, well, we have a relatively state-of-the-art emergency center at the university with lots of computers and touch screens. Those don't do us any good unless we have well-trained people who can sit and perform their roles. I would rather have smart people with no computers and no technology and no phones than have a lot of gizmos and no people who are trained and have learned how the plan works. It generally works better. The people will always be the most important resource that we have when we respond.
Okay. And, you know, the elements always are to have a plan, train your staff, and then sometimes exercise it. What type of exercise program do you have?
We have a pretty robust one, actually. We have a lot of real-world events that are just as good as an exercise, because you're actually using what you planned for. But annually we force ourselves, and, you know, I shouldn't say force ourselves, because our organization actually looks forward to this. Every spring we actually do a full-scale or functional exercise involving 100 to 200 faculty, staff, volunteers, and we simulate different scenarios. We've done pandemics, we've done a couple of earthquakes. We have the one coming up this April is going to be, the scenario is a secret so far. And so we've tried to test a little bit of everything. Quite frankly, though, you know, what we're concerned about, while we can talk about terrorism, we can talk about earthquakes in Cascadia, the thing that is actually impacting the university, and probably any municipality in this country, is loss of critical infrastructure, because it's getting so old. The electricity seems to go out more and more. Water issues, you see what's happening in Flint, Michigan. So those are sort of the bread and butter things that actually get people interested, because they know it's not some exotic thing that can happen.
Yeah. But we're starting to wind down a little bit, but really you had a terrorism incident at the on campus with the Earth Liberation Front. What was that real briefly.
That was in 2001. It was a busy year that year, besides in the Squally earthquake. The Earth Liberation Front was an eco-terrorism group that, for whatever reason, did not like our research on tree growth. And they firebombed one of our buildings on East Campus. Entire people's lives in terms of no lives were lost, thankfully, but we lost a lot of research that was irreplaceable. You can't insure that type of stuff. We watched researchers and staff standing outside watching that building burn down. Their entire life's work was gone in a flash.
Yeah. So having backup files and systems, and today it would be in the cloud, hopefully, all those things are important.
Yeah, well, and there's certain things you can do, and we were encouraging that through our business continuity program. But I always like to say you can have backups of certain things, but you can't get a replacement of the Mona Lisa. There's certain things that you can't back up, and so we're really trying to encourage those one-of-a-kind specimens that these researchers understand how important they are and make some type of plans
Contingency plan for it. Okay. Well, we can't leave the topic in the University of Washington without talking about football games. Do you get sucked into football game day as an emergency management organization?
Actually, we volunteer. All of our staff, we're all salaried. These are on the weekends. We think it's good to practice things such as radio protocol. We work every home game, generally in the periphery, because the stadium is what people think about when they see the TV in the field.
Yeah, right.
We work the parking lots. I could tell you there's a lot more interesting stories that happen in the tailgating section before and after the game in terms of needing resources. Sometimes we call in medical assistance from the Seattle Fire Department, and just assisting customers and students who may need help because, as you know, oftentimes people's state of mind is a little bit changed when they've been tailgating for a while. So it gives us practice, and it's good. 6 times a year we do it, and if we get make it to some bowl games, hopefully we'll get more in the next year or two.
Okay. One last thing is there'll be a YouTube version of this. It ends up on the internet out there, so it's not just the citizens in King County watching this. What would you tell a city or a state emergency management organization about working with their university? What brief advice would you have for them?
Look at your universities as not just a necessary evil or some type of threat on your campus. Oftentimes, neighboring cities, counties, or the state that surrounds them don't realize of the vast amount of resources that universities and colleges can bring in terms of the unique research, student interns. It's a wealth of information that can be of a benefit to the surrounding communities that our neighbors need to understand that we're not only there as some type of threat that's causing service calls, but we also can be there to support our neighbors. And that's really what every college and university around the country is hoping from their neighbor.
Okay. Well, listen, we're right up against the wire for the program today. Steve, I want to thank you for being a guest. Very well informed. Take a disaster zone memento with you. Hopefully your desk is not the disaster zone. But thanks again for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
And for you folks at home, this brings us to the end of our show for today. Thanks for tuning in and learning more about what you and others can do to become better prepared for disasters. We learned a lot about what the University of Washington is doing in that realm. But remember, if you're going to get prepared, today is a good day to start. Have a great day. Tune in again soon for another program. Bye-bye.